Welcome everyone. This is the account with the report for day 426 of the war in Ukraine. Thank you for joining me. Today I have 4 articles I want to highlight. All other updates are grouped into the usual: situation inside Ukraine, the occupied territories, Russia and Belarus, and the international developments. Before we start the news though, the flashpoints along the front. Kreminna. According to the Institute for the Study of War, geolocated footage posted on April 24th shows that Ukrainian forces have made marginal advances northeast of Kupiansk, 18 kilometers south of Kreminna, and southeast of Belarus, 12 kilometers south of Kreminna, on unspecified dates. Bakhmut. In localized counterattacks, Ukrainian defenders are trying to push Russian forces away from the O506 road. Inside Bakhmut, the situation has not changed drastically. However, Russia manages to ever so slightly advance. Avdiivka. The latest battlefield reports suggest that Russia managed to cross the H20 road near Kherson that leads from Avdiivka to Kostianivka, which would facilitate their advance on Novokalinove. And now for the article I wanted to point out, titled Russia tries to conceal its dwindling nuclear stockpile. Ilya Ponomarenko, a journalist from the Kyiv Independent, wrote a quite lengthy but interesting article about the state of Russia's nuclear stockpile and what it means for the future. He argues that one reason Russia suspended the New START treaty was to gain a quasi-legitimate reason to terminate mutual inspections of nuclear stockpiles. In the last 3 years, Russia has been seeking to keep American inspectors away, and the reason behind that is likely not Moscow's eagerness to bolster nuclear power, but rather the opposite: hiding the scale of its nuclear arsenal's reduction. The Russian nuclear stockpile has been gradually dwindling for years. Outdated delivery systems and warheads produced decades ago have begun to reach the end of their operational lifetime, and the current production of missiles, strategic bombers, or nuclear-carrying submarine systems is not at a level to offset the general reduction. I found this article very interesting. Please give it a read. The next article I wanted to point out is the Kyiv Independent's weekly newsletter called Investigative Stories from Ukraine. The stories this week are: first, media. Russian embassies in Europe install antennas for surveillance, espionage. Second, Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. Oligarch Kolomoisky reportedly owns castle, apartments in France. Third, Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. Cyprus company helps sanctioned Russian oligarch move funds. Fourth, Washington Post. Kremlin influences anti-war coalition in Germany to oppose support for Ukraine. The third article I wanted to point out is titled Russia's centuries-long quest to conquer Ukraine. This is the second part of the Kyiv Independent's Ukraine's True History video and story series. While quite long, it has an accurate and detailed recount of Ukrainian history. Please check it out if you want to learn more about the country's past. Now for the last article I wanted to highlight, titled Waiting for a Counteroffensive: How the Ukrainian Armed Forces are Preparing to Liberate the Territories and How the Pentagon document leak affects Ukraine's plans. The Ukrainian Armed Forces counteroffensive has been among the main topics in both the Western and Ukrainian media since the end of autumn 2022. However, only 5 people know exactly what is planned, when and where. This article is not speculating when and where it will happen, but focuses on the different preparations that are being made. From a short list of what is most urgently needed for the counterattack, to the newly established offensive guard and potential pitfalls of the counteroffensive. Although the article is quite long, it is very interesting. Please check it out. A look at all the minor updates out of Ukraine. During her visit to Ukraine, the Prime Minister of the Republic of Estonia, Kaja Kallas, also toured Bucha and Borodyanka. In Bucha, the Prime Minister visited the site of mass burials of civilians killed by the Russian military outside St. Andrew's Church. In Borodyanka, she was shown a monument of Taras Shevchenko shot at by Russian troops. A court has seized over 1 billion Ukrainian hryvnias, roughly $26 million worth of assets belonging to Oksana Marchenko with respect to Zaporizhzhia ferroalloy plant JSC. Marchenko is the wife of Viktor Medvedchuk, a Ukrainian businessman and pro-Russian politician to whose daughter Putin is godfather. According to American officials, Ukraine will start its counteroffensive in May. American and NATO allies have supplied Ukraine with extensive artillery and ammunition for the upcoming battle, and officials now say they are hopeful the supplies will last. 12 Ukrainian combat brigades of about 4,000 soldiers each are expected to be ready at the end of April. Although Ukraine shares few details of its operational plan with American officials, the operation is likely to unfold in the country's south, including along Ukraine's coastline on the Sea of Azov, near Russian-annexed Crimea. While Ukrainian officials have said their goal is to break through dug-in Russian defenses and create a widespread collapse in Russia's army, American officials have assessed that it is unlikely the offensive will result in a dramatic shift in momentum in Ukraine's favor. Without a decisive victory, Western support for Ukraine could weaken, and Kyiv could come under increasing pressure to enter serious negotiations to end or freeze the conflict. The Ministry of Digital Transformation of Ukraine is planning to send 100 kamikaze drones to the Bakhmut front as part of the Drone Army project. Russia attacked Kupiansk with S-300 missiles, destroying the local history museum. 2 people were killed, 10 were injured, and others likely remain under the rubble. The Kherson Oblast Military Administration has informed that all civilians have been banned from using any watercraft in Kherson Oblast. The ban applies to all types of watercraft, including sports vessels, fishing boats, recreational boats, etc. The exceptions are vessels of the Ukrainian Defense Forces and specialists engaged in the protection of aquatic bioresources. Explosions were once again reported in the city of Zaporizhzhia after an air raid warning was issued. Next up, the latest regarding the situation in the occupied territories. Occupation authorities are intensifying their search for the Ukrainian underground movement in annexed Crimea. The entrance to the harbor in temporarily occupied Sevastopol, where surface drones were able to break through, is protected by no less than 6 layers of physical barriers and is under the supervision of boats, helicopters, and combat dolphins. Olena Shuliak, the head of the Servant of the People Party, said during the Crimea Wave forum that the demographic of Crimea is deteriorating as the population is aging. Tamila Tesheva, permanent representative of the President of Ukraine in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, said at the same forum that Ukraine is preparing a priority action plan which will be implemented in the liberated peninsula of Crimea. Moving on to the news updates from Russia and Belarus. Dozens of fresh graves of the same type appeared at the Guzino-Brodskoye cemetery in the Russian regional center of Novosibirsk. Their authenticity is confirmed by a video by an anonymous source. The video shows rows of fresh graves of people who died, according to tombstones, between November 2022 and January 2023. Almost all of the graves bear wreaths with a yellow star and a black cross, one of the symbols of the Wagner PMC. In total, 200 graves were identified. Russia's foreign ministry declared an employee of the Moldovan embassy in Moscow persona non grata and banned several Moldovan officials from entering the country for anti-Russian statements. A new history textbook has been designed for high school students in Russia, and it contains a chapter with falsified data on the war in Ukraine. The authors of the textbook, one of whom is former Minister of Culture Vladimir Medinsky, lie that the war caused the population of the country to provide assistance and support to its participants, and that a mass volunteer movement has developed in all regions of the Russian Federation. The Russian Defense Ministry has accused Ukraine of violating the grain agreement, saying that Ukrainian drones have allegedly attacked Sevastopol using the grain corridor lanes. A quiet division of Ukraine by Poland and other countries is better than Kyiv's entry into NATO or a world war, Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, said in a speech to participants in the Knowledge Marathon. He also stated that Russia was dragged into the war against its will. According to Medvedev, a new world war is likely but not inevitable, and there is a prospect of a nuclear war, which is much worse than climate change. The TASS news agency published this list of all highlights from Medvedev's speech, including some I already mentioned. It is too long to read them all, but let me give you some additional ones. It is possible that Elon Musk may become the president of the United States. Medvedev considers the secession of some states from the US as a quite possible scenario and said that he will be rooting for Texas. In the US, they want to divide the Russian Federation into the United States of Siberia and other individual countries and manage them. Russia currently has 13 warships on combat duty in the Black Sea, 4 of which are missile carriers with a total salvo of up to 24 missiles. And to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. According to Defense Department spokesman Brigadier General Pat Ryder, the M1 Abrams tanks due to arrive in Germany are specifically for the training of Ukrainian servicemen and will not be sent to Ukraine to take part in combat operations. The training tanks are not coming from the active army stocks, but from other sources within the inventory, which will help expedite the preparation and transfer of the refurbished tanks to Ukraine. He also noted that the refurbished tanks are being produced to Ukraine specifications and will arrive in Ukraine by the end of the year. After an EU Foreign Affairs Council meeting, the Polish foreign minister stated that ammunition for Ukraine must be bought in Europe or wherever possible. The European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Josep Borrell, demanded that ammunition to Ukraine has to grow quicker in the next days. As reported earlier, France is blocking the purchase of weapons from those EU countries that use components outside the EU to produce shells. The European Union allocated another tranche of 1.5 billion euros to Ukraine as part of the macro-financial assistance program worth a total of 18 billion euros. The Norwegian Armed Forces reported that 100 Ukrainian military personnel arrived in Norway for a 4-week training course in military medicine, sharpshooting, and team leadership. The EU and Japan opposed the US proposal to ban all exports to Russia from G7 countries. In an interview with CNN, US Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, criticized Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov and called the fact that Russia is leading the UN Security Council meeting the epitome of irony and hypocrisy. Czech President Petr Pavel is warning that China should not be trusted to mediate peace between Russia and Ukraine, since continuing the war is beneficial to Beijing. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said that his country's governing political party decided that it would be prudent to withdraw from the International Criminal Court due to its unfair treatment of other countries. The International Criminal Court and Europol have signed a working agreement to strengthen cooperation. And now for the intelligence report segment, starting with the UK Ministry of Defence. Over April 2023, Russia's average daily casualty rate has highly likely fallen by around 30%. This follows exceptionally heavy Russian casualties over January to March 2023. Figures released by the Ukrainian General Staff suggest a reduction from a daily average of 776 Russian casualties in March to an average of 568 so far in April. Defense intelligence cannot verify Ukraine's exact methodology, but the general trend is likely accurate. Russia's losses have highly likely reduced as their attempted winter offensive has failed to achieve its objectives, and Russian forces are now focused on preparing for anticipated Ukrainian offensive operations. A look at the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. Russian mill bloggers speculated that Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered additional military command changes on April 20th. Wagner Group financier Yevgeny Prigozhin has launched an information operation to undermine the credibility of Russian state-affiliated private military groups, PMCs. Kremlin authorities proposed equalizing pay between mobilized personnel and volunteers, likely in an attempt to incentivize military service. The Saratov Oblast Investigative Committee detained a former Wagner Group commander who told Russian human rights organization Gulagu.net about Wagner's murder of children and other civilians in Bakhmut. Ukrainian forces likely conducted a naval drone attack against the Russian Black Sea Fleet's BSF base in Sevastopol in the early morning of April 24th. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov arrived in New York City on April 24th to chair a session of the United Nations Security Council, UNSC. The Wall Street Journal, WSJ, reported on April 24th that Russian ships are ferrying Iranian ammunition across the Caspian Sea to resupply Russian troops fighting in Ukraine. Krasnoyarsk Krai Deputy Konstantin Senchenko resigned on April 24th following the resignation of Krasnoyarsk Krai Governor Alexander Us on April 20th. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. During the day, the Russian occupiers launched 2 missile strikes from the S-300 air defense system at the center of the peaceful city of Kupiansk, Kharkiv Oblast. As a result, there are dead and wounded among the civilian population. The building of the local history museum, near which there is no military object, was destroyed and other civilian infrastructure was damaged. In addition, the enemy carried out 6 airstrikes and launched more than 10 attacks from rocket salvo systems in other locations. The probability of launching missile and airstrikes on the entire territory of Ukraine remains quite high. The enemy is concentrating its main efforts on conducting offensive operations in the Bakhmut, Avdiivka, and Marinka directions. During the day, units of the Defense Forces of Ukraine repelled 36 enemy attacks on the indicated areas of the front. The fiercest battles continue for Bakhmut and Marinka. In the Bakhmut direction, the enemy continues to conduct offensive actions. Heavy fighting continues for the city of Bakhmut. In addition, during the day, the enemy conducted unsuccessful offensive actions in the direction of the settlements of Bodanivka, Hromove, and Lishchivka. In the Avdiivka direction, the enemy carried out offensive actions near Severne and Pervomaiske, Donetsk Oblast, without success. In the Marinka direction, during the day, our defenders repelled numerous enemy attacks in the area of the Marinka settlement. The enemy continues to use children's educational institutions in the temporarily occupied and captured territories for their own purposes. He sets up his military facilities in them, covering himself with a human shield of children and teaching staff. Thus, in the settlement of Ursov Mariupol district, Donetsk Oblast, on the territory of one of the children's camps, up to 200 servicemen of the Russian occupation forces from among the mobilized were noted. Russian invaders continue to commit looting on the territory of Ukraine. In particular, in the village of Kardashinka, Skadovsky district, Kherson Oblast, servicemen of the Russian occupation forces search houses at night, steal household appliances and cars from civilians. And that wraps up today's report. Should you be interested in the details of any articles I mentioned, you can find links to them in the description. If you enjoyed the report and found it informative, please consider sharing it with others and giving me a like. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. You are listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.